I'm Matt Jenson with the Torrey Honors Institute here today with Haein Park from Biola's English department and John Puls from the art department. We're talking today about a new book by Trevor Hart, Making Good, Creation, Creativity, and Artistry with Baylor University Press. Now this is a long time in coming. It's the first in a 3-volume Poetics of Redemption in which Hart seeks to come up with a theology of the imagination and creativity from the 3 lenses of the doctrine of creation, incarnation, and pneumatology, the doctrine of the Holy Spirit. Interestingly, he doesn't start by going after the imago Dei, the image of God. He wants to look at it through those 3 lenses. So today, as we start, I want to point us first to a bit late in the book where I think he kind of lays out something of the goal here. He writes, this is not creativity of a sort that craves trespass on the soil of divine prerogatives, but it is nonetheless a participation in the unfolding of creation and in God's making of new things and making all things new. That is, I think Hart's trying to steer between 2 obstacles. On the one hand, he wants to avoid this sort of lazy, unhelpful, and potentially idolatrous way of speaking that says that human making is strongly akin to God's making. That is, that we are sort of gods in miniature who make things out of nothing, just like God. And on the other hand, he wants to avoid this sort of theological overreaction that says, well, no, we can't even speak about humans creating at all because only God creates, and therefore all we do is some sort of derivative, shabby, not very creative kind of a thing. I take it that he's steering in between the 2. And one of the ways he does it is by talking about the necessary, unfinished character of God's creating. Can you all speak to that? What does he mean when he's talking about the unfinished nature of God's creation?
Well, I really appreciated him in connecting it to really kenosis in a large sense. You almost see the incarnation signaled in creation, right? That God is limiting the parameters. He could have made anything, of course, being all-powerful, but he chooses certain parameters, and then after that begins to work within them. And that limiting not only in terms of the choices, but then in terms of how complete, how far along in the process he moves before he begins to invite kind of the co-creation with him. And I actually found that just a wonderful image of God's creative work, actually even just generous in a way that I hadn't, and personal in a way that I hadn't before as an artist, and that it being necessarily that way is just really a beautiful idea in its open-endedness and its offering to us. So. Yeah, just when I, as a father, in a sense, am I working with my children on something, or even with a student, for example, if I get them to the end of the process, in a sense, and don't include them in the process, it's not ultimately the most loving thing to do, though it might feel good to accomplish something quickly. The idea of my holding back, and often in a class when I'm teaching drawing or something, I'll work on a drawing for a while and just to demonstrate an idea and then leave off and leave that space for the student to try to continue and develop it, and knowing that I'm there to correct and whatnot. And that's a generous space for us in which we can learn, and participate. And so that accommodating and loving character of God really comes through there, I think.
Haein, I wonder if I could ask you, sort of, I'm playing devil's advocate, well, maybe not devil's advocate. I'm thinking what this suggests is, it could be that God's a deficient creator, that, if he leaves something unfinished when he could have finished it himself, and let's be honest, I'd rather trust him with making something than me. Is there a bit of a problem there from that angle? Is this suggestive in any way of a less than perfect creator, a less than perfect creation?
I don't think that would automatically be the case. I would see it as Jonathan was talking, the word that came to my mind is dialogic, that there is this sort of give, the generosity, but take learning, there is a relationship that gets formed. And so I think God, as a relational God, values the dialogic, the dialogue, the conversation, that our participation is not a mark of deficiency, but of plenitude, that he could do this, but in his humility. So I think along with generosity, the word that comes to my mind, and Trevor Hart emphasizes it, is humility. It intentionally gives up that that authority in a way to share with his creature. So I don't see it as deficiency. I would see it as an act of loving humility, that he embraces us in this relationship, and like a father or a mother or a teacher, gives space, and it is kind of letting go of that authority, and it's a beautiful image, and yeah, so I see it that way rather than deficiency.
That's great, because I don't think of humility often as the first one of the when I think of God the Father and His creative work, I don't think of humility, but that it's delightful to think of it that way.
And I'm thinking, I think your image of the student is a good one, because when I teach, what I value about it is a Socratic method, is that that there is this openness, and that you invite students into the conversation, and that's precisely what God is doing in His in completion, in one sense. It's an invitation and openness for us to participate and make it richer than what it could be. So.
So I teach Socratically too, and I think one of the misnomers about the typical discussion context for teaching is that it can go absolutely anywhere. I know in the midst of teaching, and so do my students, that we're going somewhere. Now, it's not as defined as if I were lecturing, because in a lecture, I'm going to my last sentence of the lecture. In a discussion, it's maybe I'm going over here, but I'm not going over here. So there's direction. Maybe it's less defined. I wonder about, it strikes me that one could say this sense of generous, humble, open-ended, unfinished creating by God, well, it gives sort of beautifully, almost dangerously gives space to human making. I wonder, does it throw the project of creation off? Or how can we know that the God who created good will continue to take this creation, in which He's invited so much participation, in the direction that it needs to go?
Well, it's faith, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, it's that is the hope that we have in God. And yeah, we're not talking about, I think, a vision here of a God that is too small or not powerful enough to do anything He wants to do, or that even our part, of course, percentages aren't necessarily defined in the book in terms of the creative act. God may be doing 99.99, out into infinity, and our contribution is there. But even then, leaving that much space is gracious. And so, yeah, certainly, I think, as an act of faith, you believe, and you see, and of course in the incarnation, the plan that had been forming, even to redeem the world and the universe from the beginning, and to make it new. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful space to have a relationship and also faith in someone far more powerful than yourself. And
I think also, along with faith, accountability and stewardship come to mind, because it is, I have this image of God delighting in us, in taking ownership. Just as, we could, to our students, dispense knowledge, from this place of authority by lecturing. But there is this delight when the student owns and comes to knowledge on his or her own. And I think that's the image that comes to me, God delighting in our participation and having us be accountable and take ownership and embracing the particular context that He placed us in. So I think that there is this sense of ownership and accountability that's built into the unfinished nature of creation.
Yeah, like he says somewhere, a couple times I think actually, that God's judgment in Genesis 1 that creation is very good is not a valediction, but an ordination. And I love that. I think you see that again and again. Even when his refusal to land too heavily on the Imago Dei is partly because he wants to say, no, creation is all forward-looking. It's looking forward to Christ, the one who is the image of God. It's looking forward to the new creation, and it sets out a path for humanity to follow rather than seeing everything accomplished in the first instance. We'll look more at this in our next conversation.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.